Welcome back, my friends. Tonight, we are traveling far across the Pacific Ocean to the mountains of northern China, where one of the greatest structures ever built still stretches across the landscape. In the quiet light of sunrise, the stone walls climb over steep hills, disappear into distant forests, and continue beyond the horizon. Standing there today, surrounded by silence and endless mountains, it is difficult to believe that millions of people once worked here, carrying heavy stones with nothing but their own hands. Every year, visitors from all over the world come to see the Great Wall of China. Some walk along its ancient paths, some stop to admire the breathtaking views, and others simply wonder the same question. Why would anyone build a wall so long that it crosses mountains, rivers, deserts, and valleys? What kind of world could have demanded such an enormous project? The answer takes us back more than 2,000 years, to a time when China was not one country, but many rival kingdoms. They fought one another for land, power, and survival. Beyond the northern frontier, powerful horsemen rode across the open grasslands, appearing without warning and disappearing just as quickly. Fear became part of everyday life, and protecting the borders was becoming more difficult every year. Then, one ruler dreamed of doing something that no one had ever attempted before. He wanted to unite the scattered kingdoms, defend his new empire, and build something so extraordinary that future generations would remember it forever. That dream would eventually become the Great Wall of China, but it would also demand an unimaginable price, measured not only in stone and earth, but also in years of labor, countless lives, and extraordinary determination. For centuries, the wall continued to grow. Different dynasties repaired it, expanded it, and strengthened it. Soldiers stood watch from its towers. Messengers carried signals across the mountains. Merchants passed nearby as trade routes connected east and west. The wall witnessed wars, victories, defeats, changing empires, and the passing of thousands of years. Today, it remains one of the most recognizable landmarks on Earth. Yet many of the stories behind it are rarely told. Was the Great Wall truly impossible to cross? Did it really protect China from invasion? And what was life like for the ordinary workers who spent years building one of history's greatest engineering achievements? So, find a comfortable place, relax, and let your imagination travel back through time. Together, we will discover the remarkable story of the Great Wall of China, a story of ambition, sacrifice, survival, and one of the greatest monuments ever created by human hands. Long before the Great Wall became a symbol of China, there was no single wall, and there was no single China. More than 2,000 years ago, the land was divided into many independent kingdoms. Each kingdom had its own ruler, its own army, and its own ambitions. Some kingdoms were rich and powerful. Others struggled to survive. Alliances were made one year and broken the next. Battles were common, and peace rarely lasted for long. This period is known today as the Warring States period, one of the most dramatic chapters in Chinese history. Across the valleys and wide plains, soldiers marched from one battlefield to another. Farmers often left their fields behind as armies passed through their villages. Families lived with uncertainty, never knowing when another conflict might begin. For ordinary people, life was shaped not by grand political decisions, but by the simple hope of surviving another year. While the kingdoms fought one another, another challenge waited beyond the northern frontier. Vast grasslands stretched far into the distance, home to skilled horsemen who lived very differently from the farming communities of China, they moved quickly across the open land, traveling with their families and animals, instead of building permanent cities. Their knowledge of horses made them fast, flexible, and difficult to defeat. Small groups could appear without warning, attack border settlements, and disappear before large armies had time to respond to protect themselves. Some kingdoms began building defensive walls near their northern borders. These early walls looked nothing like the stone structures that visitors admire today. Most were built from packed earth, wood, and local materials gathered nearby. Workers pressed layers of soil between wooden frames until the walls became surprisingly strong. Although simple in appearance, these barriers helped slow down attacks and gave soldiers valuable time to prepare for approaching enemies. Each kingdom built its own defenses because no one imagined that the separate walls would ever become part of something much larger. They were practical military projects, created to solve immediate problems rather than to leave a lasting monument for history. Yet these scattered walls quietly laid the foundation for one of the greatest construction projects the world would ever see. As the years passed, one kingdom slowly became stronger than all the others. Located in the western part of China, the state of Qin introduced new military strategies, stronger laws, and a highly organized government. Its soldiers were disciplined, its leaders were ambitious, and its rulers believed that only complete unity could bring lasting peace. On. Rival kingdoms fell before Qin's powerful armies. By the year 221 BC, a young ruler named Qin Shi Huang had achieved what many believed was impossible. For the first time in history, he united the kingdoms into one empire and declared himself the first emperor of China. It was an extraordinary achievement, but it also created an enormous responsibility. Uniting the country was only the beginning. Protecting it would prove to be an even greater challenge, and the emperor soon began searching for a solution that future generations would remember for thousands of years. After uniting China, Qin Shi Huang faced a problem that no emperor before him had ever experienced. His empire was larger than any previous kingdom, stretching across mountains, rivers, fertile plains, and distant frontières. Governing such a vast land was already difficult, but protecting it was even harder. Along the northern border, the nomadic tribes continued to move freely across the open grasslands. They were experienced riders who knew the land far better than the emperor's soldiers. They could strike quickly, take supplies or livestock, and disappear before a large army could catch them. The emperor understood that sending soldiers to chase these fast-moving raiders would never be enough. He wanted a permanent solution, something that would protect the empire for generations. Instead of building an entirely new wall from the beginning, he ordered his officials to connect many of the older walls that had already been built by the former kingdoms. Gaps were filled, weak sections were strengthened, and new walls were added, wherever the frontier remained exposed. For the first time, separate defenses slowly began to form one enormous system. This decision marked the beginning of what many people now recognize as the Great Wall of China. Yet the project was far different from the beautiful stone wall that tourists visit today. Most of the early wall was made from layers of packed earth, gravel, sand, and wooden supports. Workers filled large wooden frames with soil, then compressed it again and again until it became incredibly hard. In dry regions, these walls could survive for centuries. Even without bricks or stone, building the wall demanded an enormous workforce. Soldiers, farmers, prisoners, and convicted criminals were all sent north to help with construction. Many traveled hundreds of kilometers from their homes, leaving behind their families for months or even years. The work was exhausting. Under the hot summer sun, workers carried heavy baskets filled with earth and stones. During the freezing winters, cold winds swept across the mountains, while they continued building without modern tools or machines. Every piece of material had to be carried by human hands or by animals, climbing steep and dangerous paths. Food was often limited, and living conditions were harsh. Temporary camps appeared along the construction routes, where thousands of workers slept in simple shelters before beginning another day of labor. Injuries were common, and sickness spread easily among people working so closely together. Historians believe that many workers lost their lives during these difficult years, making the construction of the wall one of the largest and most demanding building projects in the ancient world. Despite the enormous cost, the work continued. Little by little, the wall climbed over hills, crossed narrow valleys, and followed the natural shape of the mountains. Watchtowers were added at regular intervals, so that soldiers could observe the surrounding land. If danger appeared, smoke signals during the day and fire signals at night could quickly warn nearby garrisons. Messages that once required many hours to deliver could now travel across great distances in a remarkably short time. For Qin Shi Huang, the wall represented far more than military defense. It became a symbol of a united empire, a visible reminder that the many kingdoms of the past had become one nation under a single ruler. Whether admired or criticized, his decision would influence Chinese history for centuries, as later dynasties inherited not only the empire he created, but also the enormous wall that guarded its northern frontier. Although the wall grew longer each year, it was never simply a line of earth and stone stretching across the mountains. It was part of a much larger defensive system that required careful planning and constant attention. Watchtowers stood along the wall at regular distances, allowing soldiers to observe the surrounding land for many kilometers. From these high points, they could spot movement across the grasslands long before an enemy reached the border. Communication was one of the wall's greatest strengths. During the day, soldiers sent signals by raising columns of smoke into the sky. At night, bright fires burned on the towers, carrying warnings from one station to the next. If danger appeared on the frontier, the message could travel across hundreds of kilometers in only a few hours. In an age without telephones, radios, or electricity, this system was remarkably effective. It allowed commanders to prepare their defenses long before an attack reached the nearest town. Life for the soldiers guarding the wall was often quiet, but it was never easy. Many spent months, sometimes years, far from their families. Their daily routine included repairing damaged sections of the wall, watching the distant horizon, practicing with bows and spears, and patrolling the surrounding mountains. During peaceful seasons, days could pass without seeing anyone except fellow soldiers. Yet they always remained alert, knowing that an attack could come without warning. The weather made their duties even more difficult. In northern China, winters were long and bitterly cold. Snow covered the mountains. Freezing winds swept across the open land, and temperatures often fell far below freezing. Summers brought different challenges, with intense heat, dust storms, and heavy rain in some regions. No matter the season, the soldiers remained at their posts, protecting an empire that stretched far beyond the horizon they could see. Meanwhile, life continued in the villages south of the wall. Farmers planted crops, merchants traveled between towns, and children grew up hearing stories about the enormous barrier protecting the empire. For many ordinary people, The Great Wall became a symbol of safety. They knew that soldiers stood guard beyond the mountains, watching over the frontier, while everyday life continued behind them. Yet history would eventually show that even the greatest wall had its limits. A wall could slow an invading army, delay an attack, and provide valuable time for defenders to respond, but it could not guarantee victory by itself. Strong leadership, disciplined soldiers, and wise decisions were just as important as stone towers and fortified gates. Again and again, different dynasties would discover that no wall, no matter how long or how impressive, could protect an empire if its government became weak from within. Still, the Great Wall continued to stand, century after century. New rulers repaired old sections, expanded existing defenses, and built stronger fortifications where they believed new threats might appear. The wall was no longer the project of a single emperor. It had become part of China's history itself. Growing and changing alongside the empire it was built to defend, the Great Wall that most visitors see today, however, is not the same wall built by Qin Shi Huang. After the first emperor died, new dynasties rose and fell, each facing different challenges along China's northern frontier. Some rulers repaired the old walls, others ignored them completely. In peaceful times, sections of the wall slowly crumbled under wind, rain, and the passing of centuries. In dangerous times, construction began once again, as new emperors strengthened the defenses they had inherited. The most famous version of the Great Wall was built much later, during the Ming Dynasty, which ruled China from the 14th to the 17th century. By then, military technology had improved, and the empire faced new threats from powerful northern tribes. The Ming rulers decided that the old earth walls were no longer strong enough. Instead, they began rebuilding large sections with stone and bricks, creating the impressive fortifications that still stand today. This was an enormous undertaking. Millions of bricks had to be produced, transported, and placed by hand. In many mountain regions, there were no roads wide enough for carts, so workers carried heavy materials on their backs or used simple wooden poles to balance large loads across narrow paths. In some places, steep cliffs made construction incredibly dangerous. Looking at those sections today, many visitors wonder how ancient builders managed to complete such difficult work without modern cranes or machinery. The Ming engineers also improved the wall in many ways. They built taller watchtowers that offered better views across the surrounding countryside. Strong gates protected important mountain passes where merchants, travelers, and government officials entered or left the empire. Some sections included barracks where soldiers lived throughout the year, while others stored food, weapons, and supplies in case of a long military campaign. The Great Wall had become far more than a simple barrier. It was now a complete defensive network stretching across northern China. One of the most important passes was Badaling, located not far from today's Beijing. This section protected the route leading toward the imperial capital and was considered one of the strongest parts of the entire wall. Even today, millions of visitors walk along its wide stone pathways each year, climbing the same steps that soldiers once climbed hundreds of years ago. Standing there, surrounded by mountains in every direction, it is easy to understand why this location was so important to the defense of the empire. As trade continued to grow, the Great Wall also became connected to another remarkable chapter of history. Near some of its gates, merchants traveling along the Silk Road exchanged silk, tea, spices, horses, and precious goods with traders from distant lands. Although the wall was built for defense, It also stood beside one of the world's greatest trading networks. Ideas, cultures, religions, and inventions passed through these regions, helping shape civilizations across Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe. The Great Wall was no longer only a military structure. It had become part of everyday life, part of international trade, and part of the story of China itself. Every stone, every tower, and every mountain path carried the memories of countless generations who had lived, worked, guarded, and traveled along one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. By the 17th century, however, the world around China was beginning to change. New political alliances appeared, old enemies disappeared, and military strategies continued to evolve. The Great Wall remained an extraordinary defensive structure, but history would eventually prove that even the strongest walls could not guarantee the safety of an empire. In 1644, one of the most important moments in Chinese history took place. The Ming Dynasty was already struggling with economic problems, natural disasters, and internal rebellions. Many soldiers along the frontier had not been paid for months, and confidence in the government was fading. At the same time, a powerful group from the northeast, known as the Manchus, was preparing to enter China. Surprisingly, the Great Wall itself was not destroyed in a great battle. Instead, one of its gates was opened. A Ming general named Wu Sangui decided to allow the Manchu army to pass through Shanhai Pass, one of the most important gateways in the entire wall. His decision changed the course of Chinese history. The Manchus marched into Beijing, defeated their rivals, and established the Qin Dynasty, which would rule China for more than 2.5 centuries. This remarkable event revealed an important lesson. The Great Wall had not failed because it was too weak. It had failed because political divisions inside the empire were stronger than the wall itself. Historians often point to this moment as evidence that no fortress, no matter how large or impressive, can protect a nation if unity and stability disappear from within. As the Qing dynasty expanded its control far beyond the old northern frontier, the Great Wall gradually lost much of its military importance. The empire's borders moved farther north, reducing the need for soldiers to guard every section of the wall. Many watchtowers were abandoned. Some gates became quiet villages instead of busy military checkpoints. Wind, rain, earthquakes, and passing centuries slowly damaged large parts of the structure. In remote regions, local people sometimes removed bricks from abandoned sections to build homes, roads, or farm buildings. At the time, few imagined that the wall would one day become one of the world's greatest historical treasures. To many communities, it was simply an old structure that had stood there for generations. Everything changed during the 20th century. Historians, archaeologists, and conservation experts began studying the Great Wall more carefully. They recognized that it was far more than an ancient military defense. It represented centuries of engineering, architecture, politics, and human determination. Restoration projects were launched to protect the best-preserved sections, while damaged areas were carefully documented before they disappeared forever. Today, the Great Wall of China stretches for more than 21,000 kilometers. When all of its branches and connected sections are included, it crosses mountains, deserts, rivers, forests, and grasslands, making it one of the longest construction projects ever completed by human civilization. Millions of visitors travel from around the world every year to experience its remarkable scale. Walking along the same pathways where soldiers once stood watch centuries ago, standing on the wall today, It is easy to admire its beauty, yet behind every stone lies a much deeper story, one filled with ambition, sacrifice, hope, hardship, and the determination of countless ordinary people whose names have long been forgotten. Their work created not only one of the greatest landmarks in history, but also one of humanity's most enduring symbols of perseverance today. The Great Wall of China is one of the most visited historical landmarks in the world. Every year, millions of people travel from every continent to walk along its ancient paths. Some arrive early in the morning, watching the first sunlight touch the stone towers. Others visit during autumn, when the surrounding mountains are covered with brilliant shades of red, orange, and gold. No matter the season, almost everyone pauses for a moment to look into the distance and wonder how such an incredible structure was ever built. For many visitors, the Great Wall is much more than a famous tourist attraction. It is a place where history feels real. Standing on the wall, surrounded by endless mountains, it becomes easier to imagine the soldiers who once guarded the frontier through freezing winters and burning summers. It becomes easier to picture workers carrying heavy stones up steep hills without modern machines, knowing that the work might take years to complete. Every step along the wall follows a path that millions of people walked long before the modern world existed. The Great Wall has also become one of China's most important cultural symbols. It appears in books, documentaries, films, paintings, and classrooms around the world. For many people, it represents determination, endurance, and the extraordinary ability of human beings to work together toward a common goal. Although different dynasties built different sections over many centuries, together they created something that no single generation could have completed alone. At the same time, historians continue to study the wall and discover new information. Archaeologists have found forgotten watchtowers buried beneath sand, uncovered ancient military roads hidden in remote mountains, and used modern technology to map sections that had been lost for hundreds of years. Even today, the Great Wall continues to reveal new stories about the people who built it and the empire it was meant to protect. One popular legend claims that the Great Wall is the only human-made structure visible from the moon. It is an interesting story, but it is not true. Astronauts have explained that the wall is far too narrow to be seen easily from such a great distance without special equipment. Yet this myth shows just how deeply the Great Wall has captured the imagination of people around the world. Its reputation became so great that many believed it could be seen from space, long before humans ever traveled there. More importantly, the Great Wall reminds us that history is rarely simple. It was built to defend an empire, but it also connected communities, protected trade routes, and influenced the lives of countless ordinary people. It brought security to some, hardship to others, and became a symbol whose meaning changed from one generation to the next. Like many great achievements in history, it was both remarkable and deeply human. As our journey comes to an end, the Great Wall leaves us with a powerful lesson. The strongest walls are not always built from stone or brick. The greatest strength of any civilization comes from its people, their determination, their cooperation, and their willingness to build something that will last far beyond their own lifetime. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the story of the Great Wall of China. I hope this story has helped you improve your English while discovering one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. If you enjoyed learning through stories like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join me again for another fascinating journey into the past. Until next time, take care, keep learning, and I'll see you in our next story.